Hi, I'm Dr. Greg Castello, board certified family practice with CastelloWellness.com and Adventist Health Partners. And today we're going to talk about how to read a food label. And I've chosen something pretty healthy for today, brown berry sandwich thins, multi-grain. So when we read a label, we can get a little bit of information off the front of the label, but that's oftentimes very deceptive. A lot of the cereals say contains whole grains, and it's got 3 grams of whole grains and mostly sugar, so be careful about the front of the label. From this front of the label, I can tell you that it's 100 calories per serving. That sounds good. It says 12 grams of whole grain on the front, so it actually tells me how much whole grain is in there. That's good. It tells me there's 5 grams of fiber on the front as well, so that all sounds like it's going to be a very good type of a food. When we flip the label over, this is what shows up on the back of the label, and all labels are standardized with the exact same layout specific for that food. First off is serving size, and for this particular food, serving size is 1 roll. So indeed, if I eat 1 roll, that's 100 calories. You do have to be careful. Things like ice cream, serving size is 1/2 of a cup, and if you put 1/2 a cup into an ice cream bowl, it looks pitiful. So you probably eat 4 times that. So you'd multiply your nutrients times 4 to get your actual serving size. Pasta is another good example. So pasta, a serving size is 2 ounces. A pound of pasta, 1 box, should serve 8 people, and I can't remember the last time I was able to serve 8 people on 1 box of pasta, so multiply the calories times 2 or 3 to get an appropriate serving size. Next it says calories, 100 calories. We knew that from the front. And then it tells me how many of my calories come from fat. I've got 10 calories from fat. So about 10% of that food is fat calories. In general, I like you to have about 20% of your diet calories be fat. About 30% of your calories come from protein, and about 50% of your calories come from carbohydrates. So a food that has 10% of its calories from fat, that's a good choice of food. Next, it tells me total fat and how many grams. So it's got 1 gram of fat. So a gram of fat's got 9 calories. So 9 times 1 is 9. So that's about right. That's 10 calories from fat. 2% of my daily value from fat. So if you don't want to do all the math, you can just look at the food and say, well, 2%, I could eat 50 of those in a day before I reach my fat calories. That's a good choice of food. Okay. Then it says saturated fats and trans fats. Not all fats are created equal. There's olive oil and other healthy oils that are fat, and those are good for you. There's man-made fats, trans fats, saturated fats that are bad for you. So in addition to fat, you want to look at how much saturated and trans fat. So this one has no grams and no grams of either, so that's a healthy fat for you. This would become most important when you're comparing foods like microwave popcorn or salad dressing, where they're physically adding oil as an ingredient. That's not something that naturally occurs. They're going to choose what type of oil they use, and they may use a more healthy or less healthy oil. So if you have 2 microwave popcorns and one has 3 grams of trans fats and the other one has 0, even if the calories are the same, you want to pick the popcorn that has the 0 grams of trans fat. Next is cholesterol, and bread is not really a fatty food, so that's got 0 grams of cholesterol, and it says 0%. So same thing, you don't have to know how many milligrams you're eating in a day. Just look at your percentage. So if a serving size has got 50% of your day's cholesterol, that's probably a lot of cholesterol, and maybe that's not a good food to eat. It tells me sodium, 170 milligrams, which it says is 7% of my daily amount of sodium. As a general rule, people can probably have about 4 grams or 4,000 milligrams of sodium in their diet a day. If you've got high blood pressure or heart failure or fluid issues, you probably want to restrict that to 2 grams or 2,000 milligrams. A 4-gram sodium diet is not terrible. It means no extra foods like tomato juice or canned soups that have a lot of sodium, but you could eat most foods. Limit salting of foods when you make food. A 2-gram or 2,000 milligram sodium diet is very sodium restricted and is very bland, and there's a lot of foods you can't eat, so that's a little tougher to adhere to. Total carbohydrates, this is I think probably the most interesting part. There's good carbs and bad carbs, and we talked about that in a different video if you want to refresh yourself on that. This one has 23 grams of carbohydrates, and it's telling me that's 8% of my diet. You look down, the next line is dietary fiber. So obviously you want to have fiber in your diet. Fiber is considered a carbohydrate, even though it doesn't add any calories to the food, but that's in the 23. So we take 23 and subtract 5. That leaves us with 18 actual edible or food carbohydrates in the diet. And this becomes important when we start eating high fiber cereals and things that have 30 grams of carbohydrates. It may have 15 grams of fiber in it, and that's actually very healthy for you. So don't just read total carbohydrates. We want to have about 25 or 30 grams of fiber in our diet as an adult. As a kid, we use 5 plus age rule, so a 10-year-old should have 10 plus 5, 15 grams of fiber in your diet. We did talk about dietary fiber in another video with the different soluble and insoluble fibers, so if you want to refresh on that as well. Next is sugar. So sugar is also carbohydrate. So of these 23 grams of carbs, 5 of them are fiber, leaving 18 grams, of which only 2 of them are actual added sugar. So it's got 16 grams of the better carbohydrates or the grain carbohydrates and only 2 grams of sugar. Lastly is protein, 4 grams of protein, and bread is not necessarily your best protein source, but 4 grams of protein out of 100 calories is actually pretty good. The other thing that's on all food labels is the ingredients, obviously, and we now have to list the ingredients in the order of most prevalent. So whatever is the main ingredient is listed as number 1, and then number 2 and 3 go down from there. So what food makers have done that have bad foods or high sugary foods, instead of putting sugar in it, that's the first ingredient. That's a very obvious tip-off. That's not a healthy food. They'll put some sugar, some high fructose corn syrup, maybe some cane syrup, maybe some molasses, maybe some honey. They use other sources of sugar, and when we combine 3 different sugars together, each individual one is a smaller ingredient than whole grain, so I get whole grain up to the top, but then ingredient number 2, 3, and 4 are all sugar, sugar, and sugar. So you do have to be careful and read the labels and understand what is a sugar. So I do like you to read food labels. You don't have to do it every time, but when you're picking out a new food or picking out a bread, grab 3 or 4 of them and put them side by side. When you're looking at a cereal, grab 3 or 4 of them, look at them side by side, not just calories, but compare your serving size, compare how much fiber you've got in there as well, and you do get the hang of it. Dr. Greg Castello, thanks.